Hi, I'm Paul Arthur. This is Bridge City News. Here's a look at some of the top stories we've been following. Some active military members in Quebec are accused of attempting to set up their own militia. Plus, new polling shows the federal NDP have a long road ahead to rebuild the party. And regular folk lend a helping hand to victims of last week's tragic flooding in Texas.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Thanks for joining us. 4 men are facing terrorism charges after allegedly plotting to forcibly take over land in the Quebec City area. RCMP say that includes active members of the Canadian Armed Forces. Mounties allege 3 suspects in their 20s were planning to create an anti-government militia, taking part in military-style training to facilitate terrorist activity. The RCMP says one of the accused allegedly ran an Instagram account with the aim of recruiting new members to this group. A 4th suspect has been charged with possessing firearms, prohibited devices, and explosives, among other offenses. Police searches conducted in January of last year in Quebec City led to the seizure of 16 explosive devices, about 11,000 rounds of ammunition, and other weapons. The case is being described as ideologically motivated violent extremism. RCMP say 2 pilots are dead after 2 small single-engine planes crashed this morning in southern Manitoba.
So at 8:45 a.m. this morning, Steinbach RCMP were notified of a 2-plane mid-air collision in the rural municipality of Hanover. RCMP, Fire Department, Emergency Medical Services attended and located the wreckage of 2 small single-engine aircrafts south of Steinbach. The 2 pilots were pronounced deceased on scene. There were no passengers aboard.
Officials with the Transportation Safety Board are investigating. A new poll suggests the percentage of Canadians who view the United States as a top threat has tripled since 2019. The survey by the Pew Research Center shows that 59% of Canadians see the U.S. as the top threat. But interestingly, 55% of Canadians polled also see the Americans as our top ally. This comes as U.S. President Donald Trump pursues his global trade war and has been talking about annexation. The Pew poll was done in 24 countries. In 12 of those 24 nations, the U.S. was viewed as the top ally. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced more tariffs. He is slapping a 50% tariff on all copper imports and a whopping 200% tariff on all pharmaceutical imports. No timelines have been set at this point. According to Natural Resources Canada, 52% of Canadian copper exports are shipped to America, valued at around $9.3 billion annually. A new poll by Research Co. is bad news for the federal NDP. It suggests few Canadians are familiar with the possible NDP leadership contenders. To hopefully change the polling numbers, the NDP has begun a review and renewal process. We get more from David Baxter.
So the polling firm Research Co., they have some data looking at a potential NDP leadership field. They took 9 high-profile New Democrats or people who have been putting their name out there as potential contenders for the leadership to replace Jagmeet Singh. The big takeaway, most Canadians don't know who any of these people are. Jenny Kwan had the biggest name recognition, with 47% of people saying they were familiar with who she is. But still, that's not most Canadians. It's 47%. The same goes for other current MPs. When I was talking to the pollster Mario Canseco, he was saying that this means the field is wide open for the NDP leadership. That's his big takeaway from the data he collected. There is some potential, tumult coming from the NDP as well. Over the weekend, a group called Reclaim NDP launched. Basically, what this group is doing is saying that the Central Party really mismanaged the campaign, and they're encouraging people to divert their donations away from the Central Party and put that more into the local electoral district association. The NDP has announced that Emily Tammin, she's a former NDP candidate here in Ottawa, running in Vanier and Ottawa Centre in the past, and she's also a human rights lawyer. She's going to run the party's review and renewal process. So as we all saw, things did not go well for the NDP this go around. They lost official party status, winning only 7 of the formerly 25 seats they held at dissolution. So really, the NDP is just out in the political wilderness right now. And this review and renewal process is meant to try to find a way to guide them back into at least having official party status once again. A deadline for all of that is September 19th. So I imagine we'll be seeing a report coming later in the fall, maybe early winter, but something by year's end for sure.
At this point, the NDP has not yet determined a date for the leadership vote. Hope of finding survivors from the flash flooding in Texas has dimmed. The death toll has surpassed 100, and crews are keeping up the search for people missing in the aftermath of the weekend floods. More than 80 of those killed last Friday were in Kerr County after a wall of water slammed into camps and homes along the edge of the Guadalupe River before daybreak. Floodwaters pulled people out of their cabins, tents, trailers. Some survivors had been found clinging to trees. Fellow Texans are coming from all over the state now to help clean up the damage.
Services revolves around my life, in uniform, out of uniform, and so I get out here and do what I can. If we can bring some sort of closure by finding their loved ones, of course, that's first and foremost. Helping rebuild people's lives, helping rebuild the community, always in the forefront of our minds also, because without that strong base, that foundation of friends and family and faith, I mean, that's what draws us to help. My family's been coming to hunt to go camp with our children for the last 15 years. We've known some people who have perished in the flood. We have friends within the camp community who still can't find their daughters. And so, of course, without questions, if you get here, you show up and you do whatever you can.
No one wants anybody to go through that type of traumatic experience. And so the thought, it brought me to tears many times just thinking about, as a father, them being, they're helpless.
I'm an 8th generation Texan, and this is our home, and it's, I always look at it, if I was in these people's positions, how would I feel and what would I want? But a lot of times in these situations, you get this strong effort right up front. 6 months down the road, you find the item of your loved one that you lost, and it's like those are the tough times that it's like it doesn't just end after we clean all this up, because a lot of this stuff sticks around inside you,
At least 27 campers and counselors have died at the century-old private all-girls Christian camp called Camp Mystic in Hunt, Texas. As the war in Gaza drags on, Canada continues to warn that Israel may be violating international humanitarian law and has asked for probes into incidents such as the airstrike on World Central Kitchen workers that killed a Canadian man. But Israel's Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sharon Haskell, who was born in Toronto, says Israel is fighting an existential war on 6 different fronts against terror groups supported by Iran, adding her government won't submit to international investigations of the war that it feels are meant to undermine the state's legitimacy. Haskell recounts moving her children into a bomb shelter as Iran retaliated from Israeli airstrikes last month.
My eldest one is 4 years old and my twins are 2.5 years old. And I think the most difficult point was at night, taking them quickly to the shelter, trying to make some noises so they don't hear the loud explosion, so they don't fear. And how do you explain that to babies? seeing them starting to fear every time they hear the alarm, knowing the missiles and the rockets are coming, and the loud explosions, to the point where we started sleeping in this tiny little shelter. But with all that difficulty and that fear, the only thing that went through our minds as Israelis is that right now we are securing their future, and protect them from literally a nuclear holocaust.
Haskell says after being spat on and called a dirty Jew as a 7-year-old and later serving in the Israeli military, she has grown up to realize how important Israel is as a shelter for the Jewish people. Here at home, the latest Alberta crop report has revealed the condition of many of the crops grown in Alberta, as well as soil moisture conditions. As yields begin to set for the season, the joint report from the province and the Agriculture Financial Services Corporation show a 60% average of good to excellent crop conditions province-wide, which varies in different regions. The Peace region is going through a poor season with only 22% of crops being rated good to excellent condition. However, the remaining regions are keeping pace with their 5 to 10-year averages. Additionally, the South and Peace regions each report 20% poor soil moisture, as remaining regions report fair to excellent conditions. The AFSC has said that insurance claims are up after a dry spring, but there is still optimism that July can bring enough precipitation to manage.
Huge MDI payouts. That's our pasture insurance product in Cypress County. Very dry in May, pretty dry conditions. In that month, we paid out 76 million across the province compared to 3 million last year. So May wasn't so great. June was a little better. Starting to try and get into that average range, chasing an average yield in a lot of areas, but still kind of bad in some. Kind of on the edges. The southern part of the region, Taber, Cardston, 40 Mile, and Cypress still haven't had a huge amount of rain. So we're chasing a little bit of rain here coming into July. Wheat and some of the cereals, even Durham, their yields kind of set by now. They're booting, so they, forming that head, and by now they've kind of have the yield potential that they're going to have for the year. Other crops, maybe like canola, is a good example of something that would really vulnerable in July when it's flowering. Peas might be the same way. So we're not expecting the world there, but a little bit of rain would help a lot.
Medicine Hat residents are expressing concerns about the city's proposed transportation master plan. Residents were given a chance to sit in at City Council Monday night to give feedback to city administrators. According to the city, the plan is meant to create a safe and equitable environment for all users and modes of transportation. It would serve as a blueprint as the city grows over time to fit the needs of various types of transportation. The previous plan, introduced in 2013, was very traffic-centered, and planners say with the addition of e-scooters and bikes in recent years, transportation needs have shifted.
Accessibility needs to happen for all residents, so that's where we look at that equity in transportation, where everyone can complete all trips, regardless of their age, ability within the city. So we have road right-of-ways that have been historically vehicle driven and vehicle centered. We now need to look to ways to incorporate those right-of-ways to account for all road users, whether it's a bike, a car, a pedestrian, or someone in a wheelchair.
It also focuses on active transportation and also provides guidelines as to what we need to do to kind of support or promote that active transportation and close the gaps that we have in the transportation network. We had that non-statutory public hearing, and we are probably now looking at our administration and council to kind of provide us direction as to what are the next steps, and then based on that, we'll be kind of really looking at, depending on what we are asked to, we might have to kind of rethink our strategy.
One of the vocal critics of this plan is real estate agent Bob Bork. He says the gallery was packed with residents who were fired up and fed up, saying past work on main roads in the interior of the city makes it atrocious to navigate.
I would say the mood is, if I'm allowed to say it, pissed off, fired up, big time. I don't know how many that holds, but it was packed. I got there at 6:10 and I was standing in the back. The whole gallery was full. And of course, when they started talking about it, people erupted a little bit and they had to shut the meeting down, have a 10-minute break. The letters that went in were only 4 for it and 86 against. And that's not including the submissions that came in late. So the public has spoken. With all due respect to staff and council, I reminded them that the council is elected officials. They need to listen to the citizens. We don't want this. Our economy is not tremendous. Our taxes have never been higher, and they just need to maintain and not come up with these grandiose ideas of some road system that might work in France. It just won't work here, and we're not having it.
The city is taking public submissions from Monday night to determine next steps to make changes or move forward with the final proposal. The rock group the Doobie Brothers had a famous hit song called "Taking It to the Streets." Well, the Streets Alive mission in Lethbridge is using that as the title for its program, providing nourishment to people living on the street. The group's Chief Operations Officer Cameron Kissick says 2 or 3 people work Monday through Friday to serve hundreds of people.
We've been at it for 1 week now. They go around, they provide services with the people, but they also pray with the people and minister to the people, and that's an important part of what we do and what separates us from the other outreach teams. So here we have basic needs supplies, so we do have water and juice and things like that. We also carry some hygiene stuff, some clean underwear and socks, things like that. And then from there we move on to just providing referrals for housing, trying to get the supports that they need to get them out of the tents and into somewhere they need to be. And then of course we're ministering the God's love to these people at the same time. We do bring the word of God to the street. So we hope that with the combination of those 3 things, we will make that impact. If anybody wants to come and participate as a volunteer, they can come down to streets. If we could have discussions around coming through and creating some teams that want to go in and help.
Kissick says the beauty of this program is that it can be adjusted based on the needs of the community. In sports, Medicine Hat Tigers star Gavin McKenna has announced he will play hockey for Penn State University in the 2025-26 season. As of August 1st, for the first time ever, junior players from the Canadian Hockey League can sign with NCAA teams. McKenna posted 129 points in 56 games last season, as well as 38 points in 16 WHL playoff games en route to a Western Hockey League championship. He has been labeled as a generational talent and is the expected first overall pick for the 2026 NHL draft. According to Barstool Sports, McKenna was given an offer of $700,000 from Penn State, the largest monetary offer in college hockey history. Looks like some more hot days in store, along with a smattering of rain. The complete weather forecast is on the way next.
Our 7-day forecast has us with a high of 31 for today with nice sunny skies. Tomorrow will also have a high of 31, but with partly cloudy skies. Thursday's looking to have a chance of showers with a high of 18. Friday will have a high of 26 and sunny skies. Saturday will share those sunny skies with a high of 30. Sunday will have a high of 26 and partly cloudy skies. And starting off next week with Monday, we have a high of 21 with a chance of showers. Today's almanac has us with an average high of 25 for this time of year with an average low of 10. The record high on this day was set back in 2001 at 33, and the record low was set back in 1971 with 3. The sun rose at 5:33 a.m. today and set at 9:39 p.m. Our national forecast has some rain in Vancouver and Victoria, with Vancouver having a high of 20 and Victoria a 21. Edmonton also has a chance of showers with a high of 23, and Calgary has a chance of thunder showers with a high of 24. The rest of the prairies have sunny skies, however, with Saskatoon having a high of 31, Regina a high of 32, and Winnipeg 27. Central Canada has Toronto and Ottawa with a chance of thunder showers, Ottawa having a high of 25 and Toronto a 26. Montreal will have a high of 27 and partly cloudy skies. Atlantic Canada has Fredericton with a high of 27 and nice sunny skies. Halifax has a chance of showers with a high of 25. Charlottetown has a high of 24 and sunny skies. And finishing off the national forecast with St. John's, a high of 26 and sunny skies.
Canada's housing agency says asking rent in several major cities has begun to ease as supply increases and immigration drops, but renters haven't felt the relief. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation's mid-year rental market update says the average asking rents for a two-bedroom purpose-built apartment is down year over year. But despite the drop, according to the latest national rent report from rentals.ca and Urban Nation, average asking rents remained 11.9% above levels from 3 years ago. Markets such as Vancouver, Toronto, Calgary, and Halifax have seen a decrease as landlords report it is taking more time to fill their units. The report says affordability is still worsening over time as rent-to-income ratios have steadily risen since 2020. Canada's Competition Bureau says a court order has been obtained to help conduct a probe into Amazon's online conduct in the Canadian marketplace. The regulator is investigating Amazon's fair pricing policy, which allows Amazon to penalize sellers if they set a price for a product that is significantly higher than expected or on other platforms. The regulator says the investigation will look for potential abuse of dominance and is distinct from its investigation into Amazon's marketing practices. Amazon is being compelled to produce records and information relevant to the investigation. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 116 points on the day to finish at 26,903. The Dow was down 165 points to 44,240. The S&P 500 was down 4 points to 6225, and the Nasdaq was up 5 points to finish at 20,418. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 23 cents to 68.15 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 6 cents to $3.35 US. Gold was down 35.56 to $33.0150 US an ounce, and silver was down 3 cents to $36.74 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.11 per bushel. Barley is at $6.48. Canola is at $15.97, and corn is at $7.24 per bushel. Live cattle were up 407 to 219.98, and feeder cattle were up 540 to 319.12. Both of those were August contracts. Lean hogs are up 2 cents to 106.97, and the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 73.20 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, 4 men, including some active members of the Canadian Armed Forces, are facing terrorism charges after allegedly plotting to forcibly take over land in the Quebec City area. Police searches found explosive devices, weapons, and large amounts of ammunition. Naveen Day chatted with Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley earlier today. Brian weighed in on the agreement signed by Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Ontario Premier Doug Ford, and a lot more. That interview is coming right up. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews.
The premiers of Alberta and Ontario agreed Monday to a feasibility study of new pipelines and rail lines between provinces and pledged to increase interprovincial trade of alcohol and vehicles. To talk about this and more is our political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley. Now, Brian, you called it an outbreak of common sense in Calgary when Alberta's Danielle Smith and Ontario's Doug Ford met at the McDougall Centre in downtown Calgary and signed agreements to work together. Now, they also had words for Prime Minister Mark Carney. What was your takeaway?
Just that, common sense prevailing, them talking about the need to build pipelines. I think at one point, Premier Smith has been talking about a pipeline to the West Coast, and she'd like one to the East. And then Doug Ford steps in and says, I want pipelines going north, south, east, and west. The idea that the Alberta provincial fleet, they'll try and buy trucks made in Ontario when they're procuring trucks. And that's a great idea. They're solid trucks. It's either the Silverado built in Oshawa or the F-150 out of Oakville from Ford. these are good things and ideas that premiers should be doing when we're facing trade uncertainty and all of that. But they did have those words for Prime Minister Mark Carney. The idea that, hey, you're saying nice words right now, but we will need to see action at some point. Interview that Premier Ford did with my Sun colleague Rick Bell in Calgary. He said, I'm giving them I'll paraphrase here, but Ford essentially said, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt now, but I'll be an 800-pound gorilla on them if we don't see action down the road.
Right, because what's the point of pipelines if there's still an emissions cap, which is essentially a production cap? Now, you were in Calgary for a few days. I was also there over the weekend to cover Stampede, as well as the Premier's pancake breakfast held yesterday. Now, speaking of Danielle Smith, we even see from your social media that you met up with her. And so I'm wondering, what did she have to tell you?
It was good to see her again. It's been, well, I guess I'd seen her a few months ago in Ottawa, but before that a long time. And we're both in our best Western outfits. Yes, I put on a cowboy hat to go to Stampede. I got some flack about wearing Bluntstones and not cowboy boots, but I live in Toronto. I'm not going to go whole hog there. But yeah, we just she, like so many people, just wants the political gossip, and so it was private conversation. I won't go too much into it, but like everyone else, wanting to know what's going on, trade a little bit of information here and there, trying to figure out who's making the next move. So very sharp premier that you have in Alberta.
Right, and I just recall Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi calling the Stampede a political petting zoo, which was kind of an amusing comment from him.
Considering that he wants to be premier next and he will have to go, and that he's the former mayor of Calgary, that's an odd statement. But Naheed Nenshi is, I don't have to tell you, he's an odd politician. He's one of the thinnest skinned politicians I've ever covered, and I've covered them straight across, well, most of the country, from Nova Scotia all the way out to British Columbia. Thinnest skinned guy I've ever talked to.
Wow. Now, Federal Finance Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne has sent a letter to every cabinet minister telling them to find cuts. What kind of cuts are we talking about here?
Tens of billions of dollars.
Wow.
So this is to program spending. This is what they're saying anyway. There's statutory spending, then there's program spending. There's different ways that they label the amount of money that they take from us and then allocate across the country. So this would be core programs. They're being told find 7.5% savings this year, going up to 15% over the next couple of years. That's significant. You can, an organization, if they're told, look, we have to tighten the belt, find 5% savings, yeah, you might notice it a little bit, but most organizations, most companies can find 5% savings. Finding 7.5 this year and going up to 15, that could be significant. We could, you could really end up noticing. Now, some of this, we're being told, is because the government has pledged new money for defense, but also, this is a federal government that has let spending get out of control under Justin Trudeau. So Mark Carney's mantra during the election campaign was he wants to invest more and spend less. But I can tell you, Nav, if this was a conservative government doing this, if this was Pierre Poilievre, if he had won the election and said, oh, we're going to start cutting 7.5% of program spending this year, I think that there would be outrage and horror. The press gallery would have a very different reaction than the one that they're giving to Mark Carney, promising to cut deeper, some say, than Jean Chrétien did back in the 90s.
Well, yeah, and I was going to ask you, do you find it odd that a Liberal government is looking for ways to reduce government spending, especially after 8 years of a tax and spend government?
Well, if they follow through with it, it'll be going back to the Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin, John Manley ways. Those were Liberals who understood that you need to balance the budget at some point. When Stephen Harper was in power as Conservative Prime Minister and tried to get back to balance after the financial crisis, of course, the Liberals decried every attempt to cut spending, even temporary program spending that they brought in to deal with the fiscal downturn in 2008, 2009. The Liberals would complain if you stopped spending on that. And then they got into power and, of course, showed that they weren't the same liberals. Maybe this is a return to that. John Manley used to tell me he wasn't cutting spending. He was moving it from low priorities to high priorities. It's a different way of looking at it. But look, this needs to be done. But 7.5 to 15%, as I said, that's a cut you're going to notice.
Now, still on the topic of cuts, do you think any of these cuts may impact things like healthcare?
It's tough to see how they wouldn't. Or, of course, healthcare spending by the federal government is a transfer to the provinces. Now, there is a dedicated health fund that goes to the provinces, and then there's a separate one for a dedicated social services fund, education funds, things like that. In the 90s, when Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien balanced the budget as a team, they did it by cutting transfers to the provinces. That's why premiers like Ralph Klein and Mike Harris had to cut in healthcare, because that's the biggest line item in any provincial government's budget. And if you're getting less money, you've got to cut somewhere. And those cuts to the healthcare systems across the province were painful for years. And some would say the reverberation still being felt. So I'm not sure how they don't or other programming, but the government is saying that the cuts will not hit healthcare. They will not hit dental care or pharmacare or the other child care, the other programs, which, by the way, are all provincial. They're all provincial jurisdiction that the Trudeau government decided, hey, let's spend more money and invade provincial jurisdictions. But they're saying they won't cut those. Well, what else do you have? Are you going to cut defense? No, you've promised to increase that. Are you just going to cut bureaucracy? Well, that's grown dramatically, but the bureaucrats do help run some programs or fund programs. It's unclear how they'll get to that. It's a hefty promise, but one that will be tough to deliver on.
Now, when we're talking about line items on the budget, I mean, we should probably talk about the interest we pay on our national debt. And I think last I heard it was about around $150 million a day, if I'm not mistaken. Would any of these cuts go towards bringing our debt down?
Well, I mean, you have to hope so, because we now spend more servicing the debt each year, not lowering it. This is like just paying the minimum payment on your credit card bill. The balance doesn't go down. You're just paying the interest. It's over $50 billion a year. We now spend more servicing the debt than the federal government does in transferring healthcare dollars to the provinces.
Wow.
Much more than we spend on the military. I think it's about close to double what we currently spend on the military.
Wow.
That's not a sustainable way. I mean, we're not quite as bad as the Americans, but they also have a bigger, much more dynamic economy than we have. And our governments are struggling in part because of the threat from the Americans. They sneeze, we catch a cold. So yeah, we do need to get that in order. Hopefully Mark Carney does. You have to hope the best for the country.
Now, you have a front page story today on a CBC journalist who quit and took some parting shots at the broadcaster on the way out the door. Brian, this sounds juicy. Tell us more.
Yeah, this is Travis Danraj, originally from Calgary, worked at CBC in Edmonton and elsewhere before moving east to Toronto. He covered Queen's Park, our provincial legislature, for Global and CTV, and then CBC recruited him. And they put him in the top spots. He was covering Parliament Hill for them. He was on Marketplace. And then they said, we want you to have your own 2-hour primetime show, and we're going to call it Canada Tonight with Travis Danraj. Well, it launched in January 2024 and quickly started running into problems. And Danraj says there is a lack of diversity at CBC. Now, he is a self-described brown guy whose parents immigrated from Trinidad. And the way he would tell you the story is they thought they were getting one thing. Then they found out that he wanted diversity of opinion, and that's the kind of diversity that CBC doesn't want. They're happy with diversity as long as it's only skin tone deep. He was trying to put on, I was on the show a couple of times. He would put on far left New Democrats. He'd put on conservatives. He'd put on liberals. He'd put on people that don't fit into neat, tiny boxes. And they did not like that. He accuses CBC of having a very definite political bias, of being dysfunctional, of not living up to what the state broadcaster should be. And yeah, he really torched them on the way out the door. But in a funny twist, just before sitting down to talk with you, Nav, the lawyer for Mr. Danraj sent me a message saying CBC has said he's still an employee.
What?
And she said, no, he resigned. And they said, we have to decide whether his resignation is valid. And she said, well, too bad. He's gone. So they're still saying he's an employee, but they did shut down his email shortly after he sent a long all-staff email encouraging people to help reform CBC and not let it continue to decline.
We need to keep covering this and following this story, Brian. Now, switching topics, though, the by-election has been called in Battle River Crowfoot for August. Now, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is facing some challengers. Is this a guaranteed win for him, or is there a chance that someone else could take it?
I highly doubt that someone else would take it. Look, the organized parties, I don't think the Liberals are going to put up a fight in this one. They're going to run it the way that parties used to run by-elections for leaders, let them win. The NDP says they'll put up a fight, but they're broke. They've got no money, and they have no hope in that part of Alberta, not at the federal level. So, he will apparently face the longest ballot committee again. Those are the people that put 200 names on the ballot in Carleton, where he ran and lost in the general election. He's already been out in the riding working it. He opened his office in Camrose last week. He was just chatting to him earlier today. He said he's doing a quick stop in BC, then he's back in, I think he said he's going to Three Hills. It is a massive riding geographically, and he's going to work hard to win it, other than things where he has to pop out for, this trip to BC, as I said, or going to Stampede, kind of a necessary, even if Naheed Nenshi calls it a political petting zoo, it's a necessary thing for party leaders to do. I think he's in good shape for winning this.
Now, you mentioned the longest ballot committee, and this is the group that convinced dozens of people to run as independents in Poilievre's Carleton riding in the last federal election. Do you think we will see this happen again in this by-election?
I hope not, and I hope that Elections Canada changes the rules, or Parliament changes the rules. There's one guy that goes around and recruits everyone. And why? Because he has some vision that I can't quite understand of the need for electoral reform. And this is how he's going to convince people into doing it, by annoying them to death. We don't need 200 names on a ballot. One of the names on the ballot in Carleton in the general election was a part-time teacher here in Toronto who gave an interview to the Toronto Star saying, no, I've never been there and I have no plans on going. Well, why's your name on the ballot then? You're just causing mischief. There's a few tweaks that could be made that could see this put to an end. But, hopefully either Elections Canada has the power or MPs give them the power. This isn't how you bring about electoral reform.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
A Research Co. survey released earlier this year came up with some interesting findings when Canadians were asked what things are very important to them. As you might expect, family ranked very high, coming in at 76%. 51% say friends are very important. Career is becoming more important to Canadians, rising from 29% back in 2021 to 38% now, ranking it as very important. And religion gets ranked as very important by only 26% of Canadians. Joining us to chat about why certain things are more important to us than others is Brent Taylor. He's a Lethbridge marriage coach and the author of a couple of books, I Am Whose I Am and His and Hers Greatest Need. Brent, good to have you with us. Tell us a bit more about what you do.
Great. Well, thanks for having me today, Paul. I guess basically in the short answer is I love to help couples love each other.
Yep.
That's really what I do. Now, it involves more than that, but that's really the end goal, is to really help them to love each other. So it's God's #1 creation, and we got to take it out of last place. and put it back where it
Okay.
belongs.
And the I am whose I am, that deals a little more with the topic we're touching on today.
Right.
You know, who is God, and does he actually live on the inside of us, right? And I know on your website you'll see, if you go there, you'll see, Brent, you talk about, you have this wonderful goal of actually selling a whole bunch of videos and books, but not for you, but you want to use the proceeds of that to help the homeless and get homes for them, this sort of thing, and you want to help marriages thrive. You've got some big goals. You're talking like hundreds of millions of people you want to touch.
Right. Well, I believe God has gifted me with not only understanding his and hers greatest need, but breaks it down on how to build it up. That's not taught in other places in the church or the counselor's office, as well as the book that I've just written, I Am Whose I Am. I won't know who I am until I know whose I am. And what does that all look like? The three most important things that we need are to know that God loves me, to know that I'm his, and what is my real purpose. So they're all interconnected. So the goal is the videos and the books, which have actually transformed marriages. One couple here in Lethbridge, when I did a talk at Yates, they didn't make it there, but he went to his wife, 15 years married. She said, can we watch the video? She said yes. She had her bags packed, ready to walk out the door. I talked to her an hour after they watched the video. She said, Brent, it stopped me from walking out the door. We're going to watch your video 4 more times and read your book. They're still together. A man in medicine hat, he read my book, changed everything. He watched the videos. So the goal is to sell the books and the videos that are very, very profound. Take the small amount of profit. There's a bundle package of $69 versus $104. Take that $20, times it by 100 million. That's $2 billion. I want to have 7 projects: land, a manufacturing, and then a retreat. And the manufacturing will employ the homeless and the addictions people to build homes and build a community at a house price that's roughly half and less than half the interest rate. So you'll be able to go to work. Mama Bears won't have to go to work. $1,000 a month, you can live in a 1,500 square foot home. That sounds a bit braggy, but that's the goal. So we're going to help the marriages with the videos and the books, and we're going to take that profit to help the homeless and the addictions and build the retreat for the couples.
Okay. Well, I hope that goes just as you're planning and hoping and praying here. Well, I found it very interesting that the 2 top things that Canadians found very important were about relationships. Now, family and friends, right? So is it possible that this is exactly what God actually designed us for? You mentioned it earlier in this conversation here, and it is, isn't it?
Absolutely. God made husband and wife, and they're his love made manifest. He created us to live in us and love through us. And love isn't about self. Love is about thinking of the other one ahead of yourself. Well, when husband and wife are quite opposite, you need to get to know your mate so that you can get off of yourself and give into their life. I really had to learn that it wasn't what I could get out of life or get from somebody. The joy is what I can do to give into somebody's life. That's when we come alive. When we're giving, we're living.
Yeah, and you've gone through this yourself. You mentioned it in your books and your website, your own personal story. You know, your family got messed up, broken up, divorced, you know, a number of times, and but God has restored you anyway, and you've walked through the healing process there. So God is good, and He's designed us for healthy relationships where we're always giving to one another, not taking. So, you know, but if we don't know what you're just talking about now, our purpose in life, and we're searching for that purpose and often searching in the wrong places. So we live outside of what we're designed for. You know, I sometimes use this example, you know, guitar, a wonderful thing. My son plays guitar, you know, but it can also be used as a sled. I mean, you know, you could just sit onto it, hang on to the, you know, that strap there, and down the hill you go. But of course, it destroys what the guitar is designed for. And when we live outside of what we're designed for, we run into all kinds of difficulties.
Totally. We dysfunction. If I drink this water, I have 2 pipes, food pipe and windpipe. If I put it down the windpipe, I choke. I don't walk on my toes and listen with my ears. There's only one design. We don't get to debate it. We don't get to change it.
That's right.
We get to discover and cherish it. So marriage is the same thing. God only made husband and wife in his image. He didn't make any other design, and he didn't make a mistake. He didn't make revision 1A, and he didn't make human 2.0. So when we understand the design, then we'll function properly. and husband and wife were given into each other's lives. The woman was made from the man. He could have made her from the dust like he did the man, but he made her of the man so that he would want to give into her life. And she receives that, and she reflects that. Both are in the image of God, but the woman is the glory of man. That means the shining reflection. So when husbands see that their wife isn't doing so well, they got to look at what are they sending.
It's a reflection of themselves, perhaps, right?
It's a reflection of the love that they're giving. So he's to take the love he receives from God and give it to his wife. And she reflects that love back to him. So every woman is looking to a man to take that initiative to be the leader of love, to be the model of love, as Christ the church.
But if we don't realize how much God loves us, then it's difficult for us to share that love with our spouse. Now, the importance of religion, I think, has been on a steady decline when you look at the various polling numbers and so forth in Canada over the last number of decades. And I can't help but wonder, is this tied in, with this again, that people don't realize that they're totally, absolutely, 100% loved by God, right? Just loves us, and He created us to have that relationship with Him.
Right.
Okay. So, I think that affects why religion is down. People, what are they looking for? They we maybe picture God as being this angry guy up in the sky, who's always looking to punish us. And so, no wonder people want to stay away from church and from religion, rather than saying, "Oh, okay. You mean I can have a relationship with God?" And again, your book talks about God living on the inside of us. Well, I think a lot of viewers might say, well, how can I have a relationship with somebody I can't see or touch?
It's a great question. It's a really great question. Because of the design that God has wired us for, if you draw half a circle, so God loves me. So we receive that. So my grandson he can only give what he has received. So because his father loves him so much, he gives that back. There's a pre-wiring in us that wants to give back when we've received that amazing love. But we won't know the fullness of that love until we give it back, because greater is in the giving than in receiving. Never a motive to get. There's no joy with a motive to get or self-gratify. That's what sin would be, is to self-gratify, right? But when we receive, we appreciate. But when we're giving, there's 700 to 1,000 trillion cells in this body. Every electrical, chemical, biological function come alive when we're giving. So we need to complete the circle. When we receive His love, we want to give it back, give it out, not just to Him, but to others. It's impossible to love others without loving God, and it's impossible to love others without loving, or impossible to love others without loving God. They go together. So how I love my earthly father, or anybody else, is how I love God. Well, if I have any kind of ill will to anybody, that's how I love God. But Jesus came to change our hearts from getters to givers. So we need to receive that. And a lot of people maybe really haven't received it. But even if they have, they might not be experiencing the fullness because they're not giving it out. We come alive when we're giving. The joy is in the giving. When we're giving, we're living. And most people don't realize I will have much more joy when I start giving and I don't worry about anything coming to me.
Yep. I would agree. That's essentially, again, the message of the cross, dying with Christ, so dying to our own selfish desires.
Right.
Right? I think we'd all be doing a lot better if we admitted we all tend to be selfish by nature. So, you know what? With having a rebirth with Jesus, we become like Him, loving others, giving our lives for others. And so I think out of that, too, there's this question, how can I talk to God? How can I hear God's voice? That's a question I hear a lot of times when you talk to young Christians. How do I know if God is speaking to me? Any thoughts on that briefly?
And we hear this answer for a little bit. It's largely it's in His Word. We get reaffirmed in His Word, and that's so important. But we will also hear His voice when we are, and I believe, when we're in that giving mode, when we are so thankful to Him, when we are giving into the lives of others, there's something that reignites us in that whole spirit. So I guess, and to kind of back up a little bit, we need to believe as a believer, if we haven't been born again or a Christian, if we haven't, then that's fine. We want to go down that path of receiving that. But if we have, then we need to know the truth as to who we are. And I think a lot of people doubt, or they don't really believe that they have Christ, and that they don't really have the fullness of that grace. They think they're still a sinner. They don't realize that it's Christ in them, or they think they need to get closer to God. But God actually is. So the way
how do you actually get closer if Christ actually lives inside of you? It's a good question.
It's a great, huge. So we don't actually need to get closer. We need to believe to do. Most people think they need to do to be, but we need to be to do. And so I used to be the rusted old pickup truck. Miled out, rusted out. But now I'm the brand new Denali with no rust and no miles, never to rust out and mile out again. I didn't do it. That's what the grace is. A lot of people say, well, I'm not perfect, or I'm still a sinner. No, he's made you 100% new. When I discovered that, I read the book of John in 2008, September 17th, but I was taught wrong as to who I was. I still lacked. I still didn't think I was good enough, that I was in process. If I think that I lack and I'm in process, who am I focused on? Self. I don't have the capacity to give. When I realized God made me completely new, 100% perfect, holy, sanctified, there's nothing I could do. Now that's the grace. Now, wow, God loves me so much. My love for him went up big time because he's already made me new. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to draw closer to God. I already have him. Just start giving and I'll start living. Jesus says, you already have it all.
Absolutely. It's how do we see ourselves if we don't know how God sees us, right? And again, when I look at my son, I have a number of children, a big family. They're just so precious to me. When they mess up, I'm not, out to get them. I'm out to do everything I can to bless them, to get them to do better. So, yeah, it's just somehow we've got to get it from here to here that Christ actually resides in me. It is totally scriptural. The Bible talks about we're partakers of the divine nature, that in fact, because Jesus became sin for us, we've now become the righteousness of God himself. And you go like, really? Didn't you see how I messed up yesterday or whatever? Yeah, we can mess up, but we don't go into every day with that mindset that, boy, I'm going to go sin somewhere. That's my focus. No, it's not a sin focus. It's a Christ focus, isn't it? That, you know what? No, he is in me. And because he is, I'm forgiven. I am the righteousness of God. And when you have that perspective, rather than, oh, I'm a sinner, I'm going to mess up, rather, my focus is on Christ and his love in me. I'm becoming more and more like him, becoming love. He who is joined to the Lord is one spirit with him. When we live in that fashion, what I've found is that sin just starts to drop off.
Well, this is one thing that's probably going to go against what most people would hear in church. You realize the fullness of God's grace when you don't have to become more like Christ because you already are.
Right.
Galatians 3:3 basically says that you foolish Galatians, you start in the spirit, you're going to finish. Why are you trying to become who you already are? You're going back to works.
Right.
We don't need to work for it. So what we're doing is discounting the grace. And that's the wow factor that God has given us. We don't have to try and become who we already are. We need to realize what this really is. So when I realize I have that fullness, if I'm not focused on others, if I'm focused on self, I will have fear, I will have doubt, I will have depression. When I'm worried about how many people in this world think they're not good enough.
Yeah.
How many people are worried about other people think of them or what they think others think of them. When we're focused on self, that's what the devil did to Eve. You're not good enough. And when we think we're in process, we're not good enough, we can't love. So flip the focus onto putting others ahead of ourselves. We don't need courage, we need compassion.
Yeah, it's a mindset change. Our mind needs to be renewed to think as he thinks. As 100%. He is, so are we in this world, Scripture tells us.
Absolutely.
We are the light of the world because the light lives
and it never
inside
goes
of
out.
us. Yeah, absolutely. I'm out of time here, Brent. Great conversation. We could go on this, for a long time, I think. But again, Brent Taylor, a marriage coach, but also a life coach here. Really, I encourage you to check out his books and his websites here as well. His, Hers, Greatest Need. All right, and I Am Whose I Am. So really, really important stuff. Thanks so much for joining us today. On behalf of all of us at BCN, thanks for watching.